The Aaron family court is usually thick with regret and broken promises, but today it was laced with pure poison. On one side sat Jackson Reed, a tech millionaire, looking untouchable in his $1,000 suit. At his side was not a lawyer, but his mistress, Amber Dixon, a smirk playing on her lips. They were a portrait of brazen victory. On the other side, an empty chair. The wife, Olivia Reed, 7 months pregnant, had been declared too emotionally fragile to appear. She would testify by video. Jackson thought he had it all planned. He thought he was in control. But he never imagined that the woman he'd dismissed as weak had prepared a digital bombshell, and her video testimony was about to shatter not just his case, but his entire world. Department 4B of the Stanley Moss Courthouse had transformed into an arena of quiet, expensive warfare. The air itself seemed sterile, smelling faintly of old paper and the bitter tang of dissolved marriages. Jackson Reed sat at the plaintiff's table, the very picture of a grieved success. His suit was a deep charcoal gray, tailored to perfection, a silent testament to the wealth at the center of this ugly dispute. He radiated an aura of calm, controlled power, the kind of man who believed the world was simply a series of problems that his money and influence could solve. Beside him, in a move of breathtaking arrogance, sat Amber Dixon. She wasn't his counsel. She was his statement, dressed in a sharp emerald green dress that clung to her like a second skin. She was young, beautiful, and utterly unapologetic. She'd occasionally lean in to whisper something in Jackson's ear, her long blonde hair brushing against his shoulder. It was a performance of intimacy and possession, a deliberate cruelty aimed at an opponent who wasn't even physically present. They were a united front, projecting an image of a future untethered by the past. Across the aisle was Olivia's lawyer, a weary but tenacious woman named Sarah Bennett. The chair beside her was starkly, painfully empty. Sarah had argued for a continuance, citing the advanced stage of her client's high-risk pregnancy and the immense stress of the proceedings. The judge, a formidable woman named Judge Eleanor Carter, with a reputation for suffering no fools, had compromised. "Your client's presence is required, Ms. Bennett," Judge Carter had said, her steely eyes unwavering. "The court is not unsympathetic to her condition, but Mr. Reed has rights as well. She will appear via live video link. She will be sworn in. She will testify. And she will be cross-examined. Is that clear?" And so a large television screen had been wheeled into place facing the witness stand. For now, it was dark, a black mirror reflecting the tense tableau. Jackson Reed, 38, was the epitome of tech world success. As CEO of Wells Innovations, he had transformed a small startup into a multi-million-dollar enterprise in less than a decade. His face had graced the covers of business magazines, his name mentioned in the same breath as other tech giants. His piercing blue eyes, square jaw, and prematurely silver-streaked dark hair gave him a distinguished appearance that commanded respect in boardrooms. Today, those same features were arranged in an expression of pained patience, a man waiting for justice to be served. Olivia Reed. Chapter 5 had been absent from public view for months. Once a fixture at Jackson's side during company events, the former graphic designer had retreated into privacy as her pregnancy progressed. Those who knew her described a warm, intelligent woman with a quiet strength. What few realized was that she had been as instrumental in founding Wells Innovations as her husband, though her contributions had been gradually erased from the company's official history. Amber Dixon, 28, represented everything Olivia was not: ambitious, outspoken, and unabashedly materialistic. She had entered Jackson's life as a marketing consultant for Wells Innovations. Her rapid rise from employee to mistress had been carefully concealed until Jackson decided it was time to discard his marriage. Now she sat in court like a trophy, her presence a calculated insult. Sarah Bennett had been practicing family law for 20 years. She had seen the worst of human behavior, but even she had been stunned by the evidence Olivia had brought to her office. Initially skeptical, she had quickly realized her client was not just another scorned wife, but a woman fighting for her very survival. Julian Thompson, Jackson's lawyer, was a silver-haired predator known for representing wealthy men in high-profile divorces. His success rate was legendary, as was his ruthlessness. Today, he rose to begin his opening statement, speaking in smooth, reasonable tones that made outrageous claims sound like established facts. "Your Honor," Thompson began, gesturing towards his client, "we are here today because Mr. Jackson Reed, a pillar of the tech community and a generous philanthropist, has been subjected to a campaign of emotional and financial abuse by his wife, Olivia Reed." A low murmur rippled through the few observers in the gallery. This was not the standard narrative. "The picture Mitt Reed will attempt to paint," Thompson continued, "is that of a victim, a scorned wife. And yes, Your Honor, my client does not deny his indiscretion. He has been open about his relationship with Ms. Dixon." He gave Amber a brief, almost paternal nod. "He is human. He made a mistake. But that mistake does not give Mrs. Reed license to liquidate their joint assets, to run up debts exceeding $250,000 for them in the last 6 months alone, and to engage in erratic, paranoid behavior that has given Mr. Reed serious cause for concern, not only for his own safety, but for the well-being of their unborn child." He let that hang in the air. The unborn child, the ultimate trump card. But bars to the courtroom and the calculated lies. There was love, or at least what Olivia had believed was love. To understand the depth of betrayal, one must first understand what was betrayed. 10 years earlier, Jackson and Olivia had met at Stanford University. He was a brilliant but socially awkward computer science graduate student. She was a talented graphic design major who saw beauty in the functionality of code. They met at a campus coffee shop, where Jackson was struggling to design a logo for a project. Olivia, watching him frown at his laptop from a nearby table, had offered her help. "That's actually good," he'd said, surprised, when she showed him her quick sketch. "Really good." "I know," she'd replied with a confident smile. "I charge by the hour, but for you, I'll settle for dinner." Their connection was immediate and profound. Jackson had ideas that could change the digital landscape. Olivia had the vision to make those ideas accessible and appealing to the average person. They complemented each other perfectly. After graduation, they rented a tiny apartment in Palo Alto. The walls were bare except for a framed vintage sci-fi movie poster that Jackson loved. Their furniture consisted of thrift store finds and IKEA specials. But what they lacked in material wealth, they made up for in shared dreams. Jackson had developed a revolutionary data compression algorithm, but he needed seed money to turn it into a viable product. Olivia didn't hesitate. She had inherited $51,000 from her grandmother, money she had been saving for a master's degree. Instead, she invested every penny in their shared future. "I don't need another degree," she told Jackson as she signed the bank transfer. "I need a partner who believes in me as much as I believe in him. We're in this together. Right?" "Together," he'd promised, kissing her with genuine gratitude. Every step of the way. Those early days were a blur of exhaustion and exhilaration. Olivia designed the company's first logo, a stylized U that suggested both data flow and infinite possibility. She built their website, created their marketing materials, and managed their social media presence. At night, she would sit beside Jackson as he coded, bringing him coffee and reviewing his user interface designs. They celebrated small victories with cheap champagne, their first client, their first positive review, their first month breaking even. They worked 18-hour days and collapsed into bed together, too tired for anything but holding each other close, secure in the knowledge that they were building something meaningful. "When we make it big," Jackson would say, "I'm going to buy you a house with a studio overlooking the ocean. You'll have the best equipment, the best materials, everything you deserve." Olivia would just smile. "I already have everything I need." For 5 years, they lived and breathed Wells Innovations. They moved from their apartment to a small office space where they hired their first employees. They slept on a pull-out couch in the back room when deadlines loomed. They shared every struggle and every triumph. The breakthrough came when their compression technology caught the attention of a major streaming service. Suddenly, Wells Innovations wasn't just a promising startup, it was a hot commodity. Venture capital firms came calling. Their first round of funding netted them $2.5 million. Their second round brought in $10 million more. Through it all, they remained a team. Different strengths, same goals. Or so Olivia believed. Success changed everything. Though not overnight, it was a gradual erosion, so subtle that Olivia didn't notice until the foundation had already crumbled beneath her feet. The first sign should have been the new office. Gone was the cramped space with its mismatched furniture and collaborative atmosphere. In its place rose a sleek, minimalist building of glass and steel. Jackson insisted on separate offices, his, a corner suite with panoramic views, hers, a smaller space 3 doors down. "We need to project success now," he explained when she questioned the necessity of the separation. "Clients and investors expect a certain image." The cramped apartment gave way to a sprawling modernist mansion in the hills, with floor-to-ceiling windows and an infinity pool overlooking Silicon Valley. Their beat-up sedan was replaced by a Tesla for Olivia and a Maserati for Jackson. Designer clothes replaced their casual wardrobe. Five-star restaurants replaced their favorite taco truck. With each trapping of success, Jackson seemed to grow more distant, more obsessed with appearances. The media attention fed something in him that Olivia had never seen before, a hunger for recognition, for validation, for power. The narrative began to shift in subtle ways. In interviews, Jackson spoke of "my algorithm" rather than "our vision." Press releases referred to him as the founder rather than co-founder. When Olivia pointed this out, he dismissed her concerns. "It's just simpler for the media," he said. "You know how important you are to the company." But did she? Increasingly, Olivia found herself sidelined in meetings, her suggestions overridden, her expertise questioned. The creative direction she had established for the company was gradually altered, piece by piece, until it no longer reflected her aesthetic at all. The worst came when Forbes featured Jackson in their 30 Under 40 issue. The article described him as a visionary who had built Wells Innovations from the ground up. There was a single mention of Olivia, describing her as Reed's wife, who handles some of the company's graphic design. Some of the company's graphic design, as if she hadn't been there from day one, as if she hadn't invested her inheritance, her time, her heart into building Wells Innovations. When she showed Jackson the article, hurt evident in her eyes, he shrugged. "They always simplify things. It's not a big deal." But it was a big deal. It was the culmination of a pattern that had been developing for years. Jackson wasn't just taking credit for their shared accomplishments. He was actively erasing her from the narrative. Still, Olivia tried to be supportive. She attended the galas and the fundraisers, smiled for the cameras, played the role of the proud wife. She told herself that their private reality was what mattered, not the public perception. But increasingly, the private reality was changing too. Jackson worked later and later. Business trips became more frequent. When he was home, he was distracted, always on his phone, always just about to step into another video call. The intimacy they had once shared, both physical and emotional, faded until it was just a memory. Olivia threw herself into charitable work, establishing a foundation to provide art supplies and technology to underprivileged schools. It gave her purpose, a place to direct her creative energy now that her input at Wells Innovations was no longer valued. She told herself it was enough. She told herself they were just going through a phase. She told herself that the man she had fallen in love with was still there, beneath the expensive suits and the media-trained smile. She was wrong. The truth began to unravel on their 8th wedding anniversary. Olivia had planned a special evening, a private chef, Jackson's favorite wines, a rare night together without distractions. That morning, she'd laid out a new dress on their bed, spent extra time on her hair and makeup, feeling a flutter of anticipation at the thought of reconnecting with her husband. Then the call came. Jackson's voice was apologetic but firm. An emergency board meeting in Singapore. Couldn't be helped. Critical investors. You understand, right? She did understand. She always understood. That was her role now, to understand, to accommodate, to stay out of the way of his success. "I'll make it up to you," he promised. "I've already ordered flowers. White roses. Your favorite." The roses arrived an hour later, 2 dozen pristine blooms in a crystal vase. The card read simply, "Sorry, bon love you hamoj Jay." Olivia placed the vase on the dining table she had so carefully set, then methodically put away the good china, the candles, the gifts she had bought. She changed out of her dress into sweatpants and a t-shirt, opened a bottle of wine meant for two, and tried not to feel the emptiness of the house around her. She didn't see the Instagram post until months later, when she was already deep into her investigation. But on that lonely anniversary night, while she was falling asleep alone in their king-size bed, Amber Dixon was posting a photo of herself in a bikini, clinking champagne glasses with someone just out of frame on a beach. The caption read, "Paradise with my man, Cabo anniversary surprise." The geotag was Cabo San Lucas. The date stamp was October 17th, their anniversary. Jackson returned from his Singapore trip 2 days later, tanned and relaxed in a way business trips rarely left him. Olivia noticed but said nothing. She also noticed the faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume on his collar when she hugged him, the way he turned his phone face down when she entered a room, how he started showering as soon as he got home. Small things, insignificant on their own, damning in their accumulation. The changes accelerated after that trip. Jackson became more secretive, more controlling, especially about their finances. He began to mention cash flow problems at the company, suggesting they needed to be more careful with their spending. "The market is volatile," he explained over breakfast one morning, not meeting her eyes. "We need to consolidate our accounts, streamline our financial management." "Is the company in trouble?" Olivia asked, concerned. This was the first she was hearing of any financial issues. "No, no," he said quickly. "Just standard precautions. The less we have to worry about day-to-day money management, the better. I've talked to our financial advisor. He recommends I take sole signing authority on our primary accounts for efficiency's sake." It made a certain kind of sense. Jackson had always handled the investment side of their finances. Olivia had been focused on her foundation work, preparing for the baby they had recently learned was on the way. She was tired, nauseated most mornings, emotional from the hormonal changes. The last thing she wanted was to worry about money. So she signed the papers he brought home, giving him control over their investment portfolio. His signature was familiar, confident, taking up more space than necessary. Hers was smaller, a gesture of trust she would come to regret. "It's just a formality," he assured her, filing the papers in his briefcase. "I'm protecting our future, our family, their family." The thought still brought her joy, even as other aspects of their marriage had cooled. The baby was unplanned but not unwelcome. Olivia had always wanted children, and though Jackson had been ambivalent, he seemed to warm to the idea after the initial shock wore off. He accompanied her to the first ultrasound, held her hand as they heard the rapid flutter of their child's heartbeat. He even suggested converting one of the guest rooms into a nursery, offering to hire a top designer to create a perfect space. But as her body changed, as the pregnancy became more visible, Jackson's attitude shifted. He stopped asking about doctor's appointments. He no longer placed his hand on her growing belly to feel the baby kick, and he started spending even more nights away from home. "Just until this deal closes," he would say. "After that, I'll take some time off, be more present." The deal never seemed to close. There was always another crisis, another meeting, another reason he couldn't come home. And when he was home, he was distant, irritable, finding fault with small things: the temperature of the house, the choice of dinner, the way Olivia had arranged his closet. One night, after he'd criticized the new paint color in the nursery, a soft sage green he had previously approved, Olivia broke down in tears. "What's happening to us?" "Jackson," she asked, her voice small. "You're never here. And when you are, you're different. If there's something wrong, please just tell me. For a moment, something like guilt flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by a cool detachment she had come to dread. Nothing's wrong, he said, his tone suggesting she was being irrational. I'm under a lot of pressure at work. Pressure you can't possibly understand. The least you could do is make things peaceful when I am home. Peaceful, she repeated, hurt and anger rising in equal measure. You mean silent compliant, is that what you want? I want a wife who isn't constantly emotional and making accusations. He snapped. I'm worried about you. Olivia, this isn't like you. Maybe you should talk to someone, a therapist. These mood swings can't be good for the baby. The baby. He always brought up the baby when he wanted to end a conversation, as if her pregnancy was a condition that rendered her opinions invalid, her emotions suspect. There's nothing wrong with me, she said quietly. I think there's something wrong with us. He sighed, the sound heavy with exaggerated patience. Get some rest. You're tired. We'll talk when you're feeling more stable. Stable. The word hung in the air between them, a subtle undermining of her mental state, the first of many such implications. Later, she would recognize this conversation as the beginning of his gaslighting campaign, the first step in making her doubt her own perceptions. But in that moment, exhausted and hormonal, she simply retreated, wondering if perhaps he was right. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe it was just the pregnancy affecting her emotions. She didn't know then that her instincts were correct. She didn't know that while she was questioning her own sanity, Jackson was methodically preparing to destroy her. The financial changes began subtly. Joint credit cards were suddenly declined when Olivia tried to use them. Online accounts showed pending transactions she didn't recognize. When she questioned Jackson, he dismissed her concerns. It's probably just fraud protection, he said. Use the household account card for now. I'll sort it out. The household account had limited funds, just enough for groceries and basic expenses. When Olivia needed to make a larger purchase for the nursery, a crib she had carefully researched for safety, she found the card declined. We need to be careful right now, Jackson told her when she called him, embarrassed and confused, from the store. The market's volatile. Just hold off on big purchases for a while. That night, she checked their bank statements online, only to find she no longer had access. When she confronted Jackson, his explanation was ready. Our financial advisor recommended consolidating our accounts for better security. I meant to tell you, the passwords have all been updated. So what am I supposed to do if I need something? Olivia asked, trying to keep her voice level. Just ask me, he said, as if it were the most reasonable arrangement in the world. I'll transfer whatever you need to the household account. It was the beginning of financial control, a calculated strategy to limit her independence. But it was also more than that. It was the groundwork for what would come later, for making her appear unstable, irresponsible with money, unable to manage her own affairs. The gaslighting intensified. Items Olivia was certain she had left in one place would mysteriously move to another. Appointments she clearly remembered making would not appear in her calendar. Conversations she was sure they had had, Jackson would deny ever occurred. We never discussed painting the guest room blue, he would insist, even though Olivia distinctly remembered his approval. I never agreed to have your mother visit next month, he would say, though they had specifically chosen dates together. Each incident was minor, easily attributed to pregnancy forgetfulness. But their accumulation created a constant state of self-doubt. Olivia began to keep notes on her phone, recording conversations as they happened, trying to anchor herself to reality as Jackson systematically tried to distort it. The isolation came next. Jackson began to express concerns about her friendships. Don't you think Rachel is taking advantage of you? He would ask about her closest friend. She only calls when she needs something. Or your brother seemed really judgmental about our house. Maybe we should limit those visits for a while. One by one, her support system was subtly undermined. Not through outright prohibition, Jackson was too clever for that, but through insinuation and scheduling conflicts that made maintaining relationships increasingly difficult. By the 6th month of her pregnancy, Olivia was effectively alone. Her world had narrowed to the empty house, occasional doctor's appointments, and Jackson's increasingly rare appearances. She was living on eggshells, trying to be the perfect, uncomplaining wife, hoping it would bring back the man she had married. It was during this dark period that she discovered the first concrete evidence of his betrayal. Unable to sleep one night, plagued by the baby's kicks and her own racing thoughts, she went downstairs to make tea. Jackson's laptop was open on the kitchen counter. His email still logged in an oversight so unusual it felt like divine intervention. She hesitated only a moment before sitting down to look. What she found shattered any remaining illusions. Email exchanges with their accountant about transferring funds to offshore accounts, messages to a realtor about selling property she didn't even know they owned, and most damning of all, an email thread with Julian Thompson discussing divorce strategy. The key is establishing a pattern of instability, Thompson had written. Document every emotional outburst, every irrational accusation. If we can demonstrate that her mental state makes her an unfit mother, custody becomes much more straightforward. Olivia read the words again and again, unable to process their cruelty. Unfit mother, custody. The room seemed to tilt around her. Another email caught her eye. This one from Jackson to someone named Amber. A little longer, then we're free. She suspects nothing. The prenatal depression angle is working perfectly. Prenatal depression, the term he had been casually dropping in conversations. The condition he had been urging her to get help for. The reason he gave her for feeling so disconnected and emotional. It wasn't a genuine concern. It was a strategy. Olivia closed the laptop carefully, returned to her bedroom, and lay awake until dawn, one hand protectively cradling her belly. The baby kicked against her palm, a Morse code of life and resilience. "I won't let him take you," she whispered to her unborn child. "I promise." The despair that had been consuming her for months crystallized into something harder, clearer, more potent: rage. Not the hot, destructive kind that burns itself out quickly, but a cold, focused fury that illuminated everything with stark clarity. Jackson was trying to destroy her, to take her child, to erase her from his life as thoroughly as he had erased her from the company's history. He thought she was weak, broken, easy to discard. He had forgotten who she was. He had forgotten that before she was Reed, she had been Olivia Miller, the woman who had helped him build his empire from nothing, the woman who understood every aspect of his business, his finances, his methods, the woman who had once been his equal. It was time to remind him. The next morning, when Jackson left for work, Olivia began her counterattack. It would require intelligence, patience, and resources. Fortunately, she had all three. What Jackson had dismissed as frivolous spending would become the tools of her salvation. She made 3 phone calls that day. The first was to Blackthorn Digital Forensics, a firm specializing in recovering electronic evidence. The second was to J.D. Harding and Associates, a private investigation agency with a reputation for discretion and thoroughness. The third was to Secure Com Technologies, a company that sold high-end surveillance equipment. The total cost for their services would be $50,000, a substantial sum, but a fraction of what Jackson was attempting to steal from her. And thanks to one account, he had overlooked a personal account Olivia had maintained from before their marriage. She had the funds to pay for it. As she hung up from the final call, Olivia felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Jackson believed he was writing the ending to their story. He didn't realize that Olivia was about to rewrite it entirely. She placed a protective hand over her growing belly and whispered to her unborn child, "Don't worry, little one. Mommy's much stronger than Daddy thinks." Olivia stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back at her. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her face was pale, drawn from months of stress and sleepless nights. She placed both hands on her swollen belly, feeling the gentle movement of her child within. "This isn't just about me anymore," she whispered to her reflection. "This is about us." The discovery of Jackson's emails had transformed her grief into cold. calculated determination. For too long, she had been reactive, responding to his manipulations, doubting herself, questioning her own perceptions. Now, it was time to be proactive. In her home office, a space Jackson rarely entered, Olivia created a war room of sorts. She cleared a wall, hung a large corkboard, and began mapping out everything she knew. Dates of suspicious behavior, changes in their financial arrangements, names mentioned in emails. The fragments of Jackson's betrayal began to form a coherent pattern. What she needed now was proof, irrefutable evidence that would not only protect her in a divorce, but reveal the full extent of Jackson's deception. The emotional pain of his infidelity was just the surface. Beneath it lay a systematic conspiracy to strip her of everything, including her child. The representatives from Blackthorn Digital Forensics arrived first. Disguised as IT consultants upgrading their home system, Jackson, increasingly absent, didn't question their presence when Olivia mentioned it casually over text. "We found something interesting," the lead technician told her after their initial assessment. "Your home server creates automatic backups of all connected devices. If your husband has been careless even once, used the home Wi-Fi for his phone, logged into his email on the home network, we might be able to recover deleted data." The revelation was a ray of hope. Jackson was meticulous, but he was also arrogant. He believed himself too clever to be caught, especially by a wife he increasingly underestimated. The private investigator from J.D. Harding and Associates was a former detective named Maya Johnson, a no-nonsense woman with shrewd eyes and a reassuring manner. "Men like your husband follow patterns," Maya explained during their first meeting. "They think they're being clever, but they're actually predictable. Same restaurants, same hotels, same excuses. Our job is to document those patterns." Olivia handed over Jackson's travel schedule, credit card statements she had managed to access, and the name Amber Dixon that she had discovered in his emails. "I need to know everything," Olivia said. "Not just the affair, though. I need concrete proof of that too, but the financial dealings, the offshore accounts, the meetings with his lawyer. I need to understand the full scope of what I'm up against." Maya nodded, her expression grim. "Based on what you have shown me, Mrs. Reed, this goes beyond a simple divorce case. Your husband isn't just planning to leave you. He's attempting to systematically defraud you and potentially commit securities fraud. We'll need to be extremely careful. Men who have this much to hide can become dangerous when cornered." The warning sent a chill through Olivia, but it didn't deter her. She would bun being afraid. The final piece of her counterattack came from SecureCom Technologies. The technician arrived under the guise of upgrading their home security system, a reasonable precaution for a pregnant woman often left alone in a large house. "These look like ordinary smoke detectors," he explained, showing her 3 devices that would be installed in key locations: the master bedroom, the kitchen, and Jackson's home office. But they contain high-definition cameras and microphones. They're activated by motion and voice, and they upload encrypted footage to a secure server you can access remotely. "Is this legal?" Olivia asked, hesitating for the first time. The technician's expression was carefully neutral. "In California, recording conversations without consent is generally prohibited. However, there are exceptions when gathering evidence of criminal activity, especially in a shared residence. I'm not a lawyer, Mrs. Reed, but the attorneys I work with advise their clients that protecting yourself from fraud may justify certain measures." It wasn't a clear answer, but Olivia had already consulted with Sarah Bennett about the legality of her evidence gathering. The lawyer had been cautious but supportive. "There's a fine line," Sarah had warned. "But if Jackson is engaging in criminal conspiracy, using your marriage as a cover for financial fraud, attempting to fabricate evidence against you, you may have justification for surveillance in common areas of your shared home. Just be prepared for challenges to the admissibility of anything you collect." The risk was worth taking. If Jackson was planning to paint her as unstable and unfit, if he was hiding assets and planning to leave her destitute, conventional methods wouldn't be enough to stop him. As the technician installed the devices, Olivia felt a strange calm settle over her. For months, she had been a victim, reactive and emotional. Now she was becoming something else, a strategist, methodical and focused. Jackson had taught her well, though not in the way he intended. He had shown her exactly how ruthless one needed to be to survive in his world. That night, as she lay in their bed alone, Jackson was working late again. Olivia reviewed her expenditures. $50,000 spent not on designer baby clothes or frivolous luxuries, but on the tools she needed to fight back. Jackson would eventually notice the withdrawals from her personal account. But by then, it would be too late. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the reassuring movement of her child. "We're going to be okay," she promised. "Mommy's got a plan." The first concrete evidence came from Maya Johnson's surveillance. Photographs showed Jackson's Maserati parked outside a downtown luxury apartment building at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, a night he had claimed to be in Seattle for a client meeting. More damning was the image captured the following morning, Jackson and Amber Dixon emerging from the same building at 6:15 a.m., engaged in an intimate kiss before she climbed into her convertible. The apartment is registered to a shell company, Sterling Ventures LLC, Maya explained, showing Olivia the property records. "But the LLC's mailing address matches a P.O. box associated with your husband's personal attorney, not the company's legal counsel." Another layer of deception, another piece of the puzzle. The digital forensics team made their own breakthrough. They recovered deleted text messages from a backup of Jackson's phone, synchronized to their home server before he had become more careful about his digital footprint. The exchanges between Jackson and Amber were explicit, both in their romantic content and in their discussions of the future Jackson. "Can't wait to put this all behind us. 2 more months max." "Amber, what about the baby?" "Won't that complicate things, Jackson? Trust me, it won't be an issue. The narrative is already in place. No judge will award custody to someone with her issues." "Amber, you're sure?" Jackson positive. "Julian has handled dozens of cases like this. The prenatal depression, the erratic spending, the paranoid accusations, it's all documented. We just need to stick to the plan." Reading these messages, seeing her life, her pregnancy, her mental health reduced to strategic obstacles to be overcome, Olivia felt a surge of cold fury. The erratic spending was her investment in finding the truth. The paranoid accusations were her legitimate questions about their finances and his whereabouts. The prenatal depression was the normal emotional response to discovering her husband's betrayal. The surveillance devices in the house provided the next revelation. 3 days after their installation, they captured Jackson in his home office on a video call with Julian Thompson. The crystal clear audio revealed the full extent of their strategy. "The key is timing," Thompson was saying, his voice precise and clinical. "We file for divorce at the 7-month mark of the pregnancy. It's late enough that she'll be physically and emotionally vulnerable, but not so late that the court will automatically delay proceedings until after the birth." "In custody?" Jackson asked, swirling a glass of whiskey as he leaned back in his leather chair. "We request a psychological evaluation immediately, given the documentation you have been keeping of her behavior. We have grounds. Once she's been evaluated, we argue that the stress of a newborn combined with her existing instability makes a shared custody arrangement untenable. We push for primary custody with you, generous visitation for her." Jackson nodded, satisfied. "And the financial side, the offshore transfers are complete," Thompson confirmed. "The accounts in the Cayman Islands are secure. On paper, the company is experiencing a temporary cash flow issue, justifying the liquidation of certain assets. By the time she realizes what's happening, those assets will be unreachable. And if she fights it," Thompson's laugh was cold, "with what resources you control the accounts? She has no independent income. Her name has been systematically removed from company documents. Even the house is in your name alone now. Thanks to that title transfer she signed, she'll be fighting from a position of absolute weakness." The title transfer, Olivia remembered signing something Jackson had described as refinancing paperwork during a particularly exhausting week of her pregnancy. She had trusted him. She had signed without reading the fine print. a mistake she would never make again. The most disturbing revelation came from the kitchen surveillance device. Jackson and Amber had grown bold enough to meet at the house when Olivia was at a doctor's appointment. The camera captured them laughing together at the very table where Olivia ate her solitary meals. "She's actually decorating a nursery," Amber said, her voice dripping with contempt. "It's pathetic. She still thinks you're excited about this baby." Jackson shrugged, casual in his cruelty. "Let her nest. It keeps her occupied and reinforces the image we're creating. The devoted mother-to-be who has no idea her world is about to collapse." "When do I get to move in?" Amber asked, running her fingers along the marble countertop as if already claiming the space as her own. "As soon as the divorce is filed, we'll cite irreconcilable differences publicly, but in the court documents, we'll detail her mental instability. She'll be forced to move out for her own good, of course. We'll appear magnanimous, concerned about her welfare, even as we take everything." "You're brilliant," Amber purred, leaning in to kiss him. "That's why I love you." Jackson's smile was cold. "I'm a survivor, in business and in life. There are winners and losers. Olivia made the mistake of becoming a liability instead of an asset." An asset. That's all she had ever been to him, a resource to be used and discarded when no longer valuable. The realization should have broken her heart, but instead, it hardened her resolve. Jackson had underestimated her in the most fundamental way possible. He had forgotten that she knew him better than anyone, his habits, his passwords, his blind spots. He had forgotten that she had helped build his empire and knew exactly where the foundations were weakest. The home network, Jackson's pride and joy, became Olivia's most valuable resource. Years earlier, when they had first moved into the mansion, Jackson had spent weeks designing and implementing what he called a digital fortress for their home. Fort Knox. He had named it, showing off the server room with boyish enthusiasm. Military-grade encryption, automated backups, remote access capabilities. "No one gets in without my permission." He had walked her through the system, explaining the security protocols, demonstrating the backup processes that created a mirrored copy of every connected device every 24 hours. He had even shown her the back door he'd built a maintenance port for remote access in case the main system ever failed. "See this," he had said, writing a 16-character alphanumeric code on a Post-it note and sticking it to the bottom of his desk drawer. "This is the master key. Security through obscurity. No one would ever think to look here." "That seems risky," Olivia had replied. "Isn't writing down passwords the first thing security experts warn against?" Jackson had laughed, patting her head condescendingly. "That's for ordinary people with ordinary systems. This is different. The password itself is meaningless without access to the physical network and knowledge of the port's existence. It's perfectly safe." It was hubris, pure and simple, and now that hubris would be his downfall. Late at night, while Jackson was away on one of his business trips, now confirmed by Maya's surveillance to be a weekend with Amber at a resort in Napa Valley, Olivia retrieved the Post-it note from his drawer. The code was still there, faded but legible, X7R9 2AP at Q5ZT8B. With trembling fingers, she entered the code into the maintenance portal on Jackson's home server. The screen flashed green, access granted. A surge of vindication flooded through her. For all his supposed technological sophistication, Jackson's greatest vulnerability was his own arrogance, his certainty that his wife was too naive, too trusting, too technically inept to ever challenge him. The server opened before her like a treasure chest of evidence. Email archives, financial records, text message backups, calendar entries. Each file was a piece of the puzzle, a fragment of the truth Jackson had tried to hide. She found a folder labeled iMessage Archives and opened it. Unlike the messages on Jackson's phone, which he meticulously deleted, these backups were intact, preserved by the automatic system he himself had designed. The conversations between Jackson and Amber were extensive, dating back nearly a year long before Olivia had noticed any changes in his behavior. They detailed not just their affair, but their methodical planning. Amber talked to Ellie today, called her pretending to be her friend from yoga. "She was so pathetic. Whining about you working too much." Has no idea I'm sleeping with her husband. Jackson, you're a trooper. Almost there, Arsham. Davis is drafting the initial petition. The narrative is key. We have to establish a pattern of instability. Amber, did you transfer the funds to the Cayman account, Jackson Dunn? Phase 1 of the asset shield is complete. She won't see a dime of the Omnicorp payout. Amber, she asked me about the baby shower today. The irony is sickeningly delicious, Jackson. Just play along. The more you're in her life, the crazier she'll look when she finally accuses you. It's perfect. Olivia's stomach turned. Amber wasn't just Jackson's mistress. She was an active participant in the conspiracy. The woman who smiled at her in the office, who had offered to help plan her baby shower, who had expressed such seemingly genuine excitement about the pregnancy, it had all been an act, a calculated performance designed to undermine her. But the most damning discovery came in a folder labeled Omnicorp Deal. Inside were two sets of financial projections for Wells Innovations, one showing modest but steady growth, the other showing explosive revenue increases and market expansion. At first, Olivia thought they were simply different scenarios, standard practice in business planning. Then she noticed the file names Omnicorp Due Diligence, XLSX, and Actual Financials Internal Only, XLSX. The implication was clear. Jackson was presenting falsified financial data to Omnicorp, a larger tech company that was considering acquiring Wells Innovations. He was inflating the company's value, cooking the books to secure a massive payout before the truth came to light. This wasn't just a divorce strategy. This was securities fraud. This was criminal. Olivia worked through the night, methodically downloading and organizing the evidence, creating secure backups on drives that she stored in a safe deposit box registered only in her maiden name. She established a timeline of Jackson's activities, correlating the digital evidence with Maya's surveillance and the recordings from the home devices. The pattern is unmistakable. Jackson had been systematically erasing her from the company's history, transferring assets beyond her reach, and building a false narrative about her mental stability, all while pursuing a fraudulent business deal that would net him millions before the house of cards collapsed. As dawn broke, Olivia sat back, exhausted but triumphant. She had done what Jackson thought impossible. She had penetrated his Fort Knox, uncovered his secrets, and armed herself with the truth. The baby kicked, a strong, determined movement that made her smile despite her exhaustion. "That's right, little one," she whispered, placing a hand on her belly. "We're fighters, you and your father has no idea what's coming." The digital trail was damning, but Olivia knew she needed more. She needed them in their own words, unfiltered by the distance of text messages or emails. She needed to prove the full scope of their plan. The surveillance devices from Securcom Technologies were providing a wealth of evidence. Each time Jackson brought Amber to the house, each phone call with Julian Thompson, each video conference with financial advisors, all were captured in high-definition video and audio, stored securely on servers only Olivia could access. One conversation, recorded in Jackson's home office 3 weeks after Olivia began her investigation, revealed the connection between the divorce strategy and the business fraud. Omnicorp's due diligence team is asking questions about the Q3 revenue projections, Jackson said to Julian Thompson over a video call. "Their CFO thinks the growth curve is too aggressive." "Can you stall them?" Thompson asked. "For a while, I've told them we're reorganizing our financial department, which is technically true since I fired the controller who was asking too many questions. I've got Anderson handling the books now. He's cooperative, meaning he's on your payroll," Jackson smiled. "Let's just say his consulting fees are very generous. He sees what I need him to see." "What's your timeline looking like?" Thompson asked, making notes on a legal pad. "The Omnicorp deal needs to close before the end of Q2. Their board votes in July. We need to have the divorce filed and the asset protection complete before then. And if the deal falls through," Jackson's expression darkened. "It won't. But if there are complications, that's where the divorce becomes essential. If any financial irregularities ever come to light down the road, my first defense will be that my unstable, vindictive ex-wife was trying to ruin me. She must have tampered with the books. It's the perfect scapegoat. Thompson nodded appreciatively. Clever, but risky. Securities fraud carries serious penalties. We're talking potential federal charges. Only if they can prove intent, Jackson countered. With Olivia as the fall guy and Anderson's creative accounting, it becomes a case of mismanagement at worst. Besides, by then, the bulk of the money will be offshore and untraceable. The callousness with which they discussed using her as a scapegoat for federal crimes was breathtaking. This wasn't just about the marriage anymore. This was about Jackson using their divorce as cover for a much larger fraud. Maya Johnson confirmed the scope of the conspiracy during their next meeting. We've been following the money, she explained, spreading financial documents across Olivia's kitchen table while Jackson was at a conference in Boston. The offshore accounts are just the beginning. Your husband has established a network of shell companies, each holding different assets that should rightfully be part of the marital estate. She pointed to a diagram showing the flow of funds. Here's where it gets interesting. 3 months ago, Wells Innovations received a $15 million investment from Meridian Venture Partners. Within 48 hours, $10 million was transferred to a subsidiary called Reed Innovation Labs, which doesn't appear to have any actual employees or products. From there, the money moved to accounts in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and Switzerland. Is this normal business practice? Olivia asked, though she already knew the answer. Maya's expression was grim. This is textbook money laundering and asset hiding. Combined with the falsified financials you discovered, your husband isn't just preparing for a divorce, he's setting up an escape plan. The Omnicorp acquisition is the endgame. Once that money hits, he'll have tens of millions of dollars hidden away where American courts can't reach them. And I'll be left with nothing, Olivia said quietly. Maybe even implicated in his crimes. Exactly, this goes beyond family court. Mrs. Reed, this is potentially a matter for the SEC and the FBI. The revelation should have terrified her. Instead, it crystallized her resolve. Jackson wasn't just trying to leave her, he was planning to destroy her completely, to use her as a shield against his own crimes. The final piece of the puzzle came from the most unexpected source, Amber Dixon herself. Unaware of the surveillance device in the kitchen, she revealed her own doubts during a late-night conversation with Jackson. What if something goes wrong, she asked, nervously twisting a strand of hair around her finger. What if she fights back? She's not stupid. Jackson, she's pregnant, isolated, and emotionally fragile. Jackson replied dismissively. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. The divorce will be filed, the assets will be secured, and the Omnicorp deal will be closed. She'll be left trying to prove conspiracy theories without resources or credibility. But the numbers, the ones you cooked for the Series C funding round. If anyone looks too closely before the Omnicorp deal goes through, Jackson waved a dismissive hand. Nobody is looking. The auditors signed off. They see what I want them to see. That's what a $20,000 a month consulting fee buys you: plausible deniability. He stood and walked to his desk, picking up a framed photo. It was their wedding picture. He stared at it for a moment, and Olivia, watching the recording later, searched for any sign of regret, any flicker of the man she had once loved. There was nothing but cold calculation in his eyes. The real genius of this, he said, a smile playing on his lips, is that the divorce is the perfect cover. If any financial irregularities ever do come to light down the road, my first defense will be, it was a messy divorce. My unstable wife was trying to ruin me. She must have messed with the books. It's airtight. Amber laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. You really are a bastard. Jackson Reed. I'm a survivor, he corrected her, placing the photo face down on his desk with a soft thud. And the only thing that matters is winning. We needed to liquidate my position in Wells Innovations without spooking the market or Omnicorp's due diligence team. Hiding the assets in offshore accounts under the guise of protecting them from a spendthrift wife is the only way. It's brilliant. And Olivia, Amber asked, a hint of unease in her voice. Jackson shrugged, walking back to the couch where Amber sat. What about her? She gets a pittance enough to keep her from being a nuisance. She'll be a single mom with a history of mental instability. Who's going to believe any story she tries to tell? She'll be nobody. He took Amber's chin in his hand. And we'll be in Monaco. He leaned in to kiss her, and Olivia stopped the recording, unable to watch anymore. The depth of betrayal was staggering. The man she had loved, had built a life with, had created a child with, he had become a stranger, a monster capable of calculatedly destroying her to protect himself. But he had made one critical miscalculation. He had underestimated her. He had dismissed her as weak, as a victim, as a problem to be managed. He had forgotten that she was his equal in intellect and determination. And now she had something he didn't, the truth. For 6 months, Olivia lived a carefully constructed double life. During the day, she was the foul, pregnant wife Jackson expected her to be. She attended her doctor's appointments, decorated the nursery, and allowed him to see her cry, reinforcing his belief that she was emotionally fragile and oblivious to his schemes. She asked no difficult questions, raised no alarms, gave no indication that she was aware of his betrayal. She played her role to perfection, swallowing her pride and her rage to maintain the facade of ignorance. But at night, when Jackson was working late or on one of his frequent business trips, she was hunting. She downloaded recordings, labeled evidence, built her case meticulously. She met with Maya Johnson in coffee shops far from their usual haunts, communicated with the digital forensics team through encrypted channels, and stored backups of everything in locations Jackson would never think to look. The physical and emotional toll was immense. The pregnancy, already challenging, became more difficult as stress and anxiety took their toll. She forced herself to eat properly, to rest when she could, to maintain her health for the baby's sake. But sleep was elusive, haunted by the voices of Jackson and Amber mocking her, planning her destruction in her own home. I lived on chamomile tea and sheer, unadulterated rage. She would later tell Sarah Bennett. Every night, I would remind myself that I wasn't just fighting for me anymore. I was fighting for my child's future, for justice, for the truth. The hardest moments came when Jackson made rare appearances at home, playing the concerned husband in brief, carefully staged interactions. "How are you feeling?" he would ask, his voice a masterpiece of fabricated concern. "Tired," she would answer truthfully. "The baby's been active. You should rest more," he would say, not looking up from his phone. "You seem stressed. It's not good for the baby." Always the subtle undermining, the implied criticism, the foundation laying for his narrative of her instability. She would bite her tongue, fighting the urge to confront him, to throw his betrayal in his face. The time wasn't right. She needed more evidence, more preparation. She needed him complacent and confident. One evening, as her 7th month of pregnancy began, Jackson surprised her by coming home early. He brought flowers, lilies, not her favorite, but Amber's, a slip she pretended not to notice. "I've been thinking," he said, settling into the armchair across from her in the living room. "We should talk about the birth plan." Olivia tensed. This was new territory. Jackson had shown little interest in the pregnancy details until now. "I've been reading about the importance of a stable environment for newborns," he continued, his tone reasonable, concerned. "The first few months are critical for development. Given how emotional you've been lately, I wonder if we should consider additional support." "What kind of support?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. "A night nurse, perhaps? Someone professional who could help you cope while I manage the inevitable work demands of the Omnicorp transition." The Omnicorp transition. He was openly referencing the fraudulent deal now, confident that she was too oblivious to understand its significance. "I think I can manage," she said carefully. "My mother offered to come stay for a few weeks after the birth." A flash of annoyance crossed his face. "Your mother has her own health issues. She'd be more of a burden than a help." "No, I think a professional is better. Someone who can not only assist with the baby, but monitor your adjustment to motherhood." Monitor. The word choice was deliberate. He wanted a witness, someone who could testify to her supposed instability if necessary. "I'll think about it," she said, forcing a small smile. "It's a big decision." "Of course," he agreed magnanimously. "But don't wait too long. These services book up quickly, and we want the best. The best spy, the best witness, the best accomplice in his scheme to separate her from her child." The audacity of it sent a surge of anger through her that she struggled to conceal. That night, after Jackson left for another late meeting, Olivia contacted Sarah Bennett. "He's accelerating the timeline," she explained over a secure line. "The Omnicorp deal must be getting closer. He's starting to position himself for custody already." "Then we need to accelerate too," Sarah replied. "How much evidence do you have now?" "Hundreds of hours of recordings. Financial documents showing the fraud, emails, text messages, surveillance photos. It's comprehensive." "Good, because when we move, we need to move decisively. There won't be a second chance." The warning was unnecessary. Olivia knew exactly what was at stake. Her future, her child's future, and perhaps even her freedom if Jackson succeeded in making her the scapegoat for his crimes. The double life was exhausting, a constant performance requiring vigilance and control. But with each passing day, with each piece of evidence secured, Olivia felt her strength growing. The woman Jackson had tried to diminish was reclaiming her power, preparing to fight back with a ferocity he had never anticipated. As her due date approached, Olivia knew time was running short. Jackson's behavior had shifted subtly: more presence at home, more inquiries about her health, more carefully documented concerns about her emotional state. He was building his case, preparing for the moment when he would file for divorce and begin the final phase of his plan. She needed legal representation equal to the challenge ahead. Julian Thompson was a formidable opponent, known for his aggressive tactics and high success rate in representing wealthy men in divorce proceedings. Olivia needed someone just as skilled, just as determined, but with unquestionable integrity. Sarah Bennett wasn't the obvious choice. Her small family law practice lacked the flashy offices and corporate clients of Thompson's firm, but what she lacked in resources, she made up for in reputation. A former prosecutor, she was known for her meticulous preparation, her unwavering ethical standards, and her fierce advocacy for clients facing power imbalances in divorce. Their first meeting, arranged through Maya Johnson to avoid detection, took place in a private room at a small restaurant outside the city. Olivia arrived wearing sunglasses and a scarf, conscious of the need for discretion. Sarah's initial skepticism was apparent. She had heard stories like Olivia's before: wealthy wives claiming conspiracy and fraud, only for the evidence to fall apart under scrutiny. But as Olivia methodically presented her findings, the recordings, the financial documents, the surveillance photos, the lawyer's expression shifted from doubt to shock to grim determination. "This is," Sarah paused, searching for words. "This is one of the most calculated, comprehensive attempts at marital fraud I've ever encountered. And the securities fraud angle adds a whole new dimension." "Can we fight it?" Olivia asked. The question that had been keeping her awake at night. "Can we win?" Sarah didn't offer false reassurance. "It won't be easy. Julian Thompson is ruthless, and your husband has clearly been planning this for a long time. But this evidence," she gestured to the files spread before her, "this changes everything. The question is, what do you want?" It was a profound question, one Olivia had been considering for months. What did she want? Revenge, justice, security, the above. "I want to protect my child," she said finally. "I want what's rightfully mine, my share of the company I helped build, the financial security I've earned. And I want the truth to come out. I don't want to be his victim or his scapegoat." Sarah nodded, satisfied with the answer. "Then we need a strategy as comprehensive as his, and it starts with timing." Together, they crafted a plan. Rather than filing for divorce first, they would wait for Jackson to make his move. Let him think he had the upper hand. Let him file his petition, make his accusations. lay out his false narrative in official court documents. And then they would respond with the truth, not piecemeal, not defensively, but with an overwhelming force of evidence that would not just rebut his claims, but expose the full extent of his deception. The key is presentation, Sarah explained. Judges are human. They hear cases like this every day, spouses accusing each other of lying, cheating, hiding assets. We need to break through that noise to make your evidence impossible to dismiss or explain away. Olivia considered this. A timeline, she suggested. A visual presentation showing how everything connects: the affair, the financial fraud, the gaslighting, the custody strategy. Not just individual pieces of evidence, but the entire conspiracy laid out chronologically. Sarah smiled, impressed. Exactly. We create a narrative more compelling than his because it has the benefit of being true. We don't just defend against his accusations, we reframe the entire case. The preparation was painstaking. Olivia and Sarah spent hours organizing the evidence, creating a compelling visual presentation that would guide the judge through the complex web of Jackson's deception. They anticipated his arguments, prepared counterpoints, and gathered supporting documentation for every claim. The legal questions surrounding the surveillance evidence were particularly challenging. California's two-party consent law meant that recordings made without Jackson's knowledge could potentially be inadmissible. But Sarah identified several exceptions that might apply. The confidential communication exclusion doesn't protect conversations that can be reasonably overheard, she explained. Recordings made in common areas of the marital home, the kitchen, the living room, the home office, might qualify. More importantly, there's an exception for gathering evidence of certain crimes, including fraud. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a strong argument. And the digital evidence, the emails, text messages, and financial records was on more solid legal ground. Jackson had given Olivia access to their shared server. The backups had been created automatically by a system he designed. Her access to that information was legitimate, as the due date for both the baby and Jackson's anticipated filing approached. Olivia took one final precautionary step. She arranged for a comprehensive medical evaluation with her obstetrician, a respected physician who had been monitoring her high-risk pregnancy. "I need you to document my mental and emotional state," she explained to the doctor. "My husband may attempt to claim that I'm experiencing severe prenatal depression or other issues affecting my stability." The doctor, concerned by the request, conducted a thorough evaluation and provided a detailed report confirming Olivia's mental and emotional well-being despite the significant stress of her situation. It was another piece of evidence, another counterpoint to the narrative Jackson was constructing. The final element of their preparation was practical, ensuring Olivia's physical safety and securing her position for the court battle ahead. Sarah helped her establish a separate bank account and credit cards in her maiden name. Maya Johnson arranged for emergency security protocols if needed. The digital forensics team created redundant backups of all evidence, stored in multiple secure locations. "Once this starts," Sarah warned, "it will move quickly. Jackson will be blindsided, and men like him don't respond well to losing control. He may lash out, try to retaliate. We need to be prepared for everything." Olivia nodded, her hand resting protectively on her belly. The baby was due in less than 2 months, but she suspected events would unfold even sooner. Jackson had been making more frequent calls to Julian Thompson, spending longer hours at the office, finalizing the details of the Omnicorp acquisition. The pieces were falling into place for his endgame. But while he had been preparing his attack, she had been building a fortress. Every lie he had told, every manipulation he had attempted, every asset he had hidden, all had been documented, analyzed, and incorporated into their counterattack. Jackson believed he was the chess master, carefully positioning his pieces for a decisive victory. He didn't realize that Olivia had been playing a different game entirely, one where his every move revealed more of his strategy, where his confidence became his greatest vulnerability. The final confrontation was approaching, and when it came, Jackson Reed would discover that the woman he had dismissed as weak, as a problem to be managed, had become his most formidable opponent. It happened exactly as Sarah Bennett had predicted. 1 week after Olivia entered her 7th month of pregnancy, Jackson filed for divorce. The timing was strategic late enough in the pregnancy that Olivia would be physically uncomfortable and emotionally vulnerable, but not so late that the court would automatically delay proceedings until after the birth. The petition, delivered by a process server while Jackson was conveniently away on business, was a masterpiece of calculated deception. It cited irreconcilable differences as the official reason, but the attached affidavits painted a disturbing picture of Olivia as emotionally unstable, financially irresponsible, and potentially unfit to care for a child. Statements from concerned friends, carefully selected members of Jackson's inner circle, described incidents of Olivia's erratic behavior, crying spells, paranoid accusations, irrational spending. Medical records had been attached, showing Jackson had consulted with therapists about his concerns for his wife's mental health, laying groundwork for months without Olivia's knowledge. Most damning was the financial evidence bank statements showing large withdrawals from Olivia's personal account, credit card statements with unusual purchases, all presented without context to suggest compulsive spending rather than strategic investment in her defense. Julian Thompson's accompanying motion requested an emergency psychological evaluation and temporary control of all marital assets to prevent further dissipation. It was exactly the opening move they had anticipated. Sarah's response was measured and strategic. Rather than immediately presenting their evidence, she filed a counter-petition requesting accommodations for Olivia's high-risk pregnancy, including permission to appear via video for any required court appearances. A letter from Olivia's obstetrician detailed the medical necessity of minimizing stress and physical discomfort in the final trimester. "We want them confident," Sarah explained to Olivia. "Let them think their strategy is working. Let them believe you're too fragile to fight back." Judge Eleanor Carter, known for her no-nonsense approach, split the difference in her ruling. She granted the accommodation for video testimony, but denied the request to delay proceedings entirely. She also implemented a temporary freeze on major financial transactions for both parties. A standard measure that secretly favored Olivia Jackson had already hidden his assets, but the freeze prevented him from moving anything further. The first hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the interim, Jackson's behavior at home became a study in performative concern. He made a point of asking about Olivia's health, offering to arrange meals, suggesting she rest rather than worry about the legal proceedings. "Julian says these things are routine," Mehdi told her one evening, his voice carefully modulated to project calm authority. "The judge just needs to understand the situation. I'm only thinking of what's best for the baby." Olivia nodded, her eyes downcast, playing the role of the defeated wife while inwardly counting the days until she could reveal the truth. "I'm sure it will all work out," she murmured, a statement that carried a very different meaning for her than Jackson assumed. On the morning of the hearing, Jackson appeared in the doorway of their bedroom as Olivia was getting dressed, a carefully crafted expression of concern on his face. "You don't look well," he observed. "Perhaps we should ask for a continuance after all." Olivia recognized the tactic he wanted her in court, visibly emotional and struggling, to reinforce his narrative. "No," she said softly. "I'll manage with the video arrangement. Dr. Mitchell says it's important to minimize my stress." She placed a protective hand over her belly, watching Jackson's eyes follow the movement. "Of course, I know," he agreed smoothly. "I'll have my lawyer let the court know you'll be appearing remotely." What he didn't know, what she had carefully concealed, was that Olivia had no intention of appearing from their bedroom in a state of dishevelment. She had arranged for Sarah Bennett to pick her up after Jackson left, taking her to a professional setting where she would present a very different image than the one he expected. As Jackson and Amber entered the courtroom that morning, the confidence was palpable. Jackson in his $1,000 suit, the picture of the concerned husband forced to take difficult action. Amber beside him, not as his attorney but as a statement, the next chapter already being written before the current one had ended. Across the aisle, Sarah Bennett sat alone beside an empty chair, a visual representation of the absent fragile wife. Julian Thompson approached her with a look of professional sympathy. "I understand Mrs. Reed will be appearing by video," he said, his voice carrying just far enough to be heard by those nearby. "I hope she's feeling well enough to participate meaningfully." Sarah's smile was cool. "I believe the court will find Mrs. Reed quite capable of participating, Mr. Thompson, but thank you for your concern." Thompson nodded, missing the steel beneath her pleasant tone, and returned to his client. He leaned in to whisper something to Jackson, who smiled slightly, the satisfied expression of a man watching his plans unfold exactly as designed. Judge Carter entered, and the court rose. A formidable woman in her 60s with silver hair cut in a severe bob. She had a reputation for seeing through posturing and manipulation. Her gaze swept the courtroom, lingering momentarily on Amber's presence at the plaintiff's table. "I see we have an unusual seating arrangement," she observed dryly. "Ms. Dixon, unless you're a party to this case or have been admitted to the bar when I wasn't looking, you'll need to move to the gallery." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Amber flushed, clearly unaccustomed to being challenged. Jackson leaned over to whisper something to Thompson, who stood. "Your Honor, Ms. Dixon is providing emotional support to my client during this difficult time. We'd request the court's indulgence." Judge Carter's expression did not soften. "Mr. Thompson, this is a court of law, not a therapy session. Emotional support can be provided in the hallway. Miss Dixon will sit in the gallery, or she will leave the courtroom." "Which will it be?" Amber stood, her face rigid with humiliation, and moved to the front row of the gallery. It was a small moment, but significant, the first indication that the carefully choreographed performance Jackson had planned might not proceed unchallenged. Once the courtroom settled, Thompson rose to begin his opening statement. He spoke in smooth, reasonable tones, the kind that made outrageous claims sound like established facts. "Your Honor," he began, gesturing towards his client, "we are here today because Mr. Jackson Reed, a pillar of the tech community and a generous philanthropist, has been subjected to a campaign of emotional and financial abuse by his wife, Olivia Reed." A low murmur rippled through the observers. This was not the standard narrative. "The picture Mrs. Reed will attempt to paint," Thompson continued, "is that of a victim, a scorned wife. And yes, Your Honor, my client does not deny his indiscretion. He has been open about his relationship with Ms. Dixon." He gave a brief nod toward the gallery. "He is human. He made a mistake. But that mistake does not give Mrs. Reed license to liquidate their joint assets, to run up debts exceeding $250,000 in the last 6 months alone, and to engage in erratic, paranoid behavior that has given Mr. Reed serious cause for concern, not only for his own safety, but for the well-being of their unborn child." He let that hang in the air. The unborn child, the ultimate trump card. "We will present evidence of exorbitant and inexplicable spending. Credit card statements showing thousands spent on luxury goods she has no use for. We will show emails and text messages filled with baseless, delusional accusations. We will reluctantly be forced to call witnesses who will testify to Mr. Reed's increasingly unstable mental state." Jackson looked down, shaking his head with practiced sadness. It was a masterful performance. He was the reasonable man pushed to the brink by an unhinged woman. His affair was merely a symptom of a much larger problem where Sarah Bennett stood immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Thompson is testifying. These are unsubstantiated and inflammatory claims designed to poison the well before my client has even had a chance to speak." "Noted, Ms. Bennett," Judge Carter said, her eyes fixed on Thompson. "Tread carefully. Mr. Thompson, present your case. Don't editorialize." "Of course, Your Honor." Thompson gave a slight bow. For the next hour, he laid out his version of reality. He presented bank statements highlighting every large withdrawal Olivia had made. He showed receipts for what he characterized as frivolous purchases, framing them not as a new mother's preparation, but as manic spending. He painted a picture of a marriage that had been crumbling long before Amber Dixon ever entered it. a decay caused by Olivia's alleged instability. Jackson was his star witness. When Thompson called him to the stand, he walked with a heavy gait, a man burdened by sorrow. "Mr. Reed," Thompson began, "can you describe your wife's behavior in the months leading up to your separation?" Jackson sighed, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. "It was difficult," he said, his voice thick with false emotion. "Olivia became distant, suspicious of everyone. She would accuse me of wild things, of spying on her, of trying to poison her. She would lock herself in her room for days, and the spending." He shook his head sadly. "I tried to talk to her about it, to get her help. I suggested therapy for us, for her. She refused. She saw it as an attack." "And the child?" Thompson asked softly. "I'm terrified," Jackson confessed, looking directly at the judge. "I love my child. I want to be a father. But I have grave concerns about Olivia's ability to provide a stable environment. That's all I want, a safe, stable home for my son." He didn't once look at the dark screen where Olivia would soon appear. To him, it was an irrelevance. His wife was a problem to be managed, and he was managing it with ruthless efficiency. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of carefully constructed lies, Thompson rested his initial presentation. "The plaintiff rests for now, Your Honor." Judge Carter looked from Jackson, the picture of pained sincerity, to the empty chair beside Sarah Bennett. "Miss Bennett," the judge said, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet room, "it is time to hear from your client. Let's get the video link established." A bailiff moved to the television. Jackson sat back down next to Thompson, giving Amber a confident smile across the aisle. He had framed the narrative. Now his unstable, emotional, pregnant wife would get on screen, likely break down in tears, and prove his every point. He thought he knew exactly what was coming. The bailiff fiddled with a cable, and the screen flickered. A blue background appeared, then dissolved into a live image. But it wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't a close-up of a tear-streaked face in a dimly lit bedroom. The video showed Olivia Reed. Yes, but she was seated upright at a simple wooden desk. Her pregnancy was obvious, a gentle curve beneath a plain gray sweater. Her face was pale, but her expression was one of profound, unnerving calm. Her eyes, clear and direct, seemed to look right through the screen, past the lawyers and the judge, and straight at her husband. The background was not a bedroom, but a neutral wall, a blank canvas. She looked composed, prepared, and utterly in control. The quiet confidence radiating from the screen was the first crack in Jackson's perfect facade. He shifted in his seat, his smirk tightening into a thin, uncertain line. Amber, from her seat in the gallery, visibly tensed. "Mrs. Reed, can you hear me?" Judge Carter's voice boomed. On screen, Olivia leaned slightly toward her microphone. "Yes, Your Honor. I can hear you perfectly." Her voice was not the hysterical shriek Jackson had been counting on. It was steady. It was clear. It was the voice of a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. "Please raise your right hand," the bailiff instructed. She complied, her gaze never wavering from the camera. She was sworn in. Sarah Bennett rose. "Mrs. Reed," she began gently, "you have heard the testimony of your husband. You have heard the accusations he and his counsel have made against you. How do you respond?" Olivia took a slow, deliberate breath. She looked at her husband, a man she had once loved, a man she had built a life with. She saw the smugness, the deceit, the utter lack of remorse. "I respond," Olivia said, her voice ringing with a sudden steely strength that made Jackson flinch, "by saying that my husband is a very, very good storyteller. But I have a story of my own, and unlike his, mine has evidence." She reached for her mouse. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would like to share my screen. I have prepared a presentation." "A presentation?" Judge Carter raised an eyebrow. "Yes, Your Honor. A timeline will show. I believe it will clarify a great many things." Thompson was on his feet instantly. Objection. Your Honor, this is an ambush. We have no prior knowledge of any presentation. We don't know what this material contains. It's a transparent attempt to introduce inadmissible evidence. Sarah countered smoothly. Your Honor, my client is the witness. Her testimony is the evidence. She has simply chosen to organize her testimony in a visual format for the sake of clarity and efficiency. Everything she is about to present is her own sworn testimony. If Mr. Thompson wishes to cross-examine her on it, he is more than welcome. Judge Carter considered this for a moment, her eyes darting between the frantic lawyer and the unnervingly calm woman on the screen. I'll allow it, she declared, her voice firm. But be warned, Mrs. Reed, this is a court of law, not a movie theater. Proceed. Jackson's blood ran cold. A presentation. A timeline. This wasn't in the script. His plan, so meticulous and controlled, was suddenly veering off course. He stared at the screen, at the face of the woman he thought he had broken, and for the first time that day, he felt a sliver of genuine fear. On the screen, Olivia gave a small, sad smile. Thank you, Your Honor, she said. I'm ready. And with a click of her mouse, the screen changed. The image of her face was replaced by a title card written in simple, elegant font against a black background. It read The Reed Project, A Timeline of Deceit. Amber Dixon let out a small, involuntary gasp. Jackson Reed felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't a defense. This was an execution. Before the courtroom and the calculated lies, there was love, or at least what Olivia had believed was love. It felt important to start there. Her video presentation didn't begin with anger. It began with a photograph. It was a slightly grainy selfie taken 10 years prior. A younger Jackson, his hair unruly, a wide, uninhibited grin on his face. A younger Olivia, her head on his shoulder, her eyes bright with adoration. They were in a cramped, messy apartment, the walls bare except for a framed poster for a vintage sci-fi movie. This was us, Olivia's voice narrated, calm and even, a stark contrast to the warmth of the image. 10 years ago, we had nothing but a shared dream. Jackson had the idea for a new data compression algorithm, and I had a small inheritance from my grandmother. I was a graphic designer just starting out. I believed in him. The screen shifted. It showed a scanned image of a bank transfer slip, a withdrawal of $51,000 from an account in the name of Olivia Miller, her maiden name, and a deposit of the same amount into a newly formed corporate account, Wells Innovations, LLC. I gave him everything I had, her voice continued, not as a loan, but as a partner. I designed the first logo. I built the first website. I sat with him through 100 all-nighters as he wrote the code, making coffee and debugging his user interface. We were a team. More photos flashed across the screen. A small, sparse office with 2 desks. Jackson asleep on a beanbag chair. Olivia painting the logo on their new office door. A cheap bottle of champagne being popped the day they secured their first round of seed funding. They were intimate, happy moments. Each one now a dagger twisting in the gut. Jackson watched, his hands clenched into fists on the table. He could feel Thompson shifting uncomfortably beside him. He remembered those days. He had buried them, dismissed them as a necessary, inconvenient prelude to his success. Seeing them now, weaponized against him, felt like a violation. For 5 years, we built the company together. Olivia narrated. Then success came, real success, the kind that changes people. The images changed too. The cramped apartment was replaced by a sprawling minimalist mansion with floor-to-ceiling windows. The beat-up sedan was replaced by a series of gleaming luxury cars. The photos became more posed, less candid parties on yachts, red carpet events, magazine covers featuring Jackson as the new face of tech. Olivia was often in the photos, but she looked increasingly like an accessory, a beautiful but silent partner. The more money we made, Olivia said, her voice tinged with the first hint of coldness. The more Jackson changed. The shared dream became his dream. Our success became his success. We became I. She put up a slide with a series of text message screenshots. Jackson closing the Series B funding. Huge day for me. Jackson just landed the keynote at TechCrunch. Can't believe how far I've come. Jackson. The Forbes profile just dropped. They're calling me a visionary. I was so proud of him, Olivia said softly. But I was also being slowly, methodically erased from the company's official history, from the narrative he told the world, and eventually, from his life. The screen faded to black. When it came back, it showed a calendar. A date was circled in red, October 17th of the previous year. This was our 8th wedding anniversary, Olivia stated. Jackson told me he had to fly to Singapore for an emergency board meeting. He was so sorry, so apologetic. He sent 24 white roses to the house. The next image was a screenshot of an Instagram post. It was from Amber Dixon's public profile. Amber in a bikini, clinking champagne glasses with someone just out of frame on a beach. The caption read, "Paradise with my Cabo anniversary surprise." The geotag was Cabo San Lucas. The date stamp was October 17th. A low gasp went through the courtroom. Thompson looked at his client with a flash of fury. This was not the simple, acknowledged indiscretion he had been led to believe. This was a deep, calculated deception. I didn't see this post until months later, Olivia explained. At the time, I just felt lonely. But that was the night things began to unravel. He came home from his Singapore trip, and he was different, colder, more secretive with his phone. He started working later. He smelled of a perfume I didn't wear. The next slide was titled "The Red Flags." It was a meticulous catalog of deceit phone logs showing late-night calls to a number she didn't recognize, credit card statements with charges for jewelry she never received, dinners at restaurants he never took her to. He started talking about our finances, Olivia said. He told me the company was facing a cash flow problem, that we needed to be careful. He insisted we change our joint accounts, giving him sole signing authority for efficiency's sake. He said it was to protect me, so I wouldn't have to worry about it. She put up a scanned document, a legal form signed by both of them, giving Jackson control over their primary investment portfolio. Olivia's signature was clear. He told me it was a formality, she said. He told me he was protecting our future, our family. I was pregnant. I was tired. I trusted him. Jackson squirmed. This was his narrative twisted and turned back on him. Yes, he'd done all that, but it was for a reason to secure his assets before divorcing the woman who was becoming a liability. Hearing it laid out so plainly, so clinically, made it sound monstrous. The spending, Olivia went on, addressing the accusation from Thompson directly. Mr. Thompson claims I went on a spending spree. He's right, I did. Let me show you what I bought. The screen showed a series of receipts not for designer clothes or handbags. One was for $15,000, the payee Blackthorn Digital Forensics, another for $25,000. The payee J.D. Harding and Associates, Private Investigations, another for $10,000. Payee Secure Technologies. I wasn't buying shoes, Your Honor, Olivia said, her voice sharp as glass. I was buying an education. I was buying the truth. Because I knew deep down that my husband was not just cheating on me. He was trying to erase me. And I needed to know why. The final image of this section appeared on the screen. It was a still frame from a security camera, grainy and dark. It showed the front door of their home. Jackson was standing there, embracing Amber, kissing her deeply before she got into her car. The timestamp in the corner showed it was 6:15 a.m., just hours before he would come into the bedroom, kiss a sleeping Olivia on the forehead, and tell her he was heading to the office for an early start. He wasn't just having an affair. Olivia's voice trembled with suppressed rage. He was living a completely separate life, funded by our shared wealth, while systematically stripping me of any access to it. He told me we were broke while he was buying her a new convertible. He told me I was paranoid while he was bringing her to our home. He told me I was unstable because he needed me to be. She paused, letting the weight of her words fill the silent courtroom. He didn't just break my heart. He tried to break my mind. He wanted me to seem crazy so that when this day came, nobody would believe me. He underestimated me. He forgot who I was before I was Mrs. Reed. He forgot that I was the one who helped him build the damn thing. And I knew from the very beginning where all the bodies were buried. The screen faded to black once more, ending the second part of her testimony. The mood in the courtroom had shifted irrevocably. The image of the pained, reasonable husband had been shattered. In its place was a cold, calculating predator. Jackson Reed was no longer looking at the screen. He was staring at his lawyer, his face pale with fury and panic. The trap he had so carefully laid for his wife had just sprung shut on him instead. And the worst part was, he knew the most damning evidence was yet to come. The discovery of the affair was a gut-wrenching blow. But for Olivia, it quickly morphed from heartbreak into a chilling premonition. The calculated nature of the deception, the lies about their finances, the subtle gaslighting, it all pointed to something far more sinister than simple infidelity. Jackson wasn't just leaving her, he was planning to annihilate her. The realization came one sleepless night, the blue glow of her phone illuminating tears on her cheeks as she scrolled through Amber's vapid social media. It wasn't sadness she felt anymore. It was a cold, hard clarity. Grief was a luxury she couldn't afford. Resolve was a necessity. This was the core of the third part of her video testimony, which she titled The Investigation. When you've spent a decade with a man like Jackson, Olivia's voice narrated over a black screen, you learn his habits, his passwords, his blind spots. His greatest weakness has always been his arrogance. He believes he is smarter than everyone else in the room. He never imagines that the people he dismisses, his assistant, the IT guy, his wife, are paying attention. The screen lit up with a complex diagram, a flowchart of the Reed's home network. It showed laptops, phones, smart TVs, and at the center of it all, a high-end server that Jackson used for personal projects and data backups. This is our home network, she explained. Jackson designed it himself. He was proud of it. He called it Fort Knox. He even walked me through the security protocols years ago, wanting to show off. He explained how the main server created a mirrored, encrypted backup of every device connected to it every 24 hours. A perfect digital snapshot, his phone, my phone, his laptop, everything. A red circle appeared on the diagram, highlighting a specific port on the server. He also showed me the back door he'd built for himself, a maintenance port for remote access in case the main system ever failed. He was so proud of it. He wrote the access key down on a post-it note and stuck it to the bottom of his desk drawer. He told me it was security through obscurity. I told him it was hubris. The next image was a close-up photo of that very post-it note, a string of 16 alphanumeric characters. Jackson's face went ashen. He remembered that conversation. He had been condescending, explaining the complex system to his non-technical wife. He never imagined she actually understood it. He certainly never imagined she would ever use it. For 6 months, Olivia continued, her voice steady despite the memory. I lived a double life. During the day, I was the pregnant wife playing the part he expected. I went to my doctor's appointments. I decorated the nursery. I let him see me cry. But at night, when he was working late or on one of his business trips, I was hunting. The screen showed a screen recording of a desktop. The audience watched as Olivia's cursor expertly navigated through a complex file system. It was a mirror image of Jackson's laptop. She opened a folder labeled iMessage Archives. He was smart enough to delete incriminating text from his phone, she explained. But he forgot about the server. The server backed up everything, instantly. A torrent of text messages between Jackson and Amber filled the screen. Amber talked to Ellie today, called her pretending to be her friend from yoga. She was so pathetic, whining about you working too much. Jackson, you're a trooper. Almost there. Thompson is drafting the initial petition. The narrative is key. We have to establish a pattern of instability. Amber, did you transfer the funds to the Cayman account Jackson done? Phase 1 of the asset shield is complete. She won't see a dime of the Omnicorp payout. Amber, she asked me about the baby shower today. The irony is sickeningly delicious, Jackson. Just play along. The more you're in her life, the crazier she'll look when she finally accuses you. It's perfect. Sarah Bennett, Olivia's lawyer, had to steady herself on her lectern. This was beyond anything she had imagined. This wasn't just an affair. It was a conspiracy, a premeditated, malicious plot to defraud a pregnant woman and paint her as insane. Julian Thompson looked as though he'd been struck by lightning. He was named. He was implicated in building a false narrative. His carefully crafted image of a respectable officer of the court was being incinerated in real time. He stared at his client with the look of pure betrayal, but Olivia was not done. The digital trail was damning, she said. But I knew I needed more. I needed them in their own words, without the filter of a keyboard. I needed to prove the full scope of their plan. That's when I bought the services of SecureCom Technologies. The screen showed an invoice for 3 high-fidelity audio-video smoke detectors. Our home has a lot of blind spots, Olivia explained. I hired a technician under the guise of upgrading our fire safety system before the baby arrived. I paid him handsomely in cash to install 3 special smoke detectors, one in the master bedroom, one in the kitchen, and one in Jackson's home office. A collective, audible gasp filled the courtroom. This was the moment everything tilted. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been inverted with bone-jarring force. For the next 3 months, I listened, Olivia said, and for the first time, her voice cracked with a raw, visceral pain. I listened to my husband and his mistress in my home, in my bed, planning my destruction. I listened to them mock me. I listened to them laugh about how they were going to leave me with nothing, how they would fight for custody and prove I was an unfit mother. I had to force myself to eat for the baby. I had to stop myself from screaming. Every night, I would download the recordings, label them, and save them. I lived on chamomile tea and sheer, unadulterated rage. She took a deep breath, composing herself. The momentary crack in her armor only made her resolve seem more formidable. I have over 200 hours of audio and video recordings, she stated, her voice returning to its icy calm. But I believe for the purposes of this hearing, the court only needs to see one, a conversation they had 2 weeks ago in Jackson's office. They were celebrating. The final slide of this section appeared. It was a still image, a video thumbnail showing Jackson and Amber on the leather couch in his office. They were holding champagne glasses, smiling, looking triumphant. The title below the image read, Exhibit A, the Victory Lap. They believed they had already won, Olivia said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. They thought their plan was perfect. They were about to file for divorce. They were discussing their future. And they were discussing a secret much, much bigger than me, or the affair, or the money. She looked directly into the camera lens, as if staring into her husband's soul. They were talking about why the money had to be hidden so desperately. They were talking about the criminal fraud at Wells Innovations. The word fraud hung in the air like a death sentence. Jackson Reed shot up from his chair. Lies, he roared, his face purple with rage and terror. She's insane. This is illegal. You can't record someone in their own home. Amber looked like a ghost, her face a mask of frozen panic. Judge Carter slammed her gavel down, the sound cracking like a rifle shot through the courtroom. Mr. Reed, sit down now, or I will have you removed and held in contempt. Jackson, trembling, slowly sank back into his chair, his eyes wide with a primal fear. He was no longer a master of the universe. He was an animal in a trap, and he was just beginning to realize the jaws had closed. Ms. Bennett, the judge said, her voice dangerously low, turning her attention back to the screen. A word of caution. Your client is making an extremely serious allegation, and she has just admitted to potentially violating wiretapping laws. Sarah Bennett was ready. Your Honor, under California law, it is illegal to record a confidential communication. However, the law does not protect conversations that can be reasonably overheard. These recordings were made in common areas of the shared marital home. More importantly, the law makes exceptions for recording conversations to obtain evidence of a felony such as kidnapping or extortion. We will argue that a conspiracy to fraudulently divest a spouse of her rightful assets and to use the legal system to declare her mentally unfit to take custody of her child rises to the level of criminal conspiracy and extortion. But for now, that is a matter for another day. For this hearing, what matters is the truth. I suggest we hear it. Judge Carter stared at the screen for a long, silent moment. The entire courtroom held its breath. Then she gave a single, sharp nod. Mrs. Reed, she said, play the video. With the judge's command, Olivia clicked the play button. The still image of Jackson and Amber on the couch came to life. The audio was crystal clear, a testament to the expensive equipment Olivia had purchased. The video opened with the clink of crystal glasses. Jackson and Amber were beaming. To us, Jackson said, his voice smooth and triumphant. To the new beginning, phase 1 complete. I can't believe how easy it was, Amber said, taking a sip of champagne. She kicked off her heels and curled her legs up onto the couch. She signed everything, boss. No questions asked. Of course she did, Jackson scoffed, leaning back. She's too busy picking out nursery colors and feeling sorry for herself to look at the fine print. She trusts me. Pathetic. Really. In the courtroom, every eye was glued to the screen. Jackson himself seemed hypnotized, watching his own downfall with a horrified fascination. Amber had her hands over her face, her carefully constructed composure utterly demolished. On screen, Amber traced the rim of her glass. Are you sure Thompson has the narrative locked down the unstable angle? Locked and loaded. Jackson confirmed with a smug grin. He's got the credit card statements, the witnesses from the club who saw her looking distraught. By the time we get to court, she'll look like a hysterical, paranoid wreck. We'll offer her a settlement so low she'll have to take it. In custody? Amber asked, her voice eager. A judge will take one look at our evidence and her emotional state and see that the child is better off with a stable, successful father. And his loving new partner, Amber added, leaning in to kiss him. The casual cruelty of it was stunning. They weren't just discussing legal strategy, they were reveling in their own malice. Judge Carter's face was a stony mask, but her knuckles were white where she gripped her pen. Then the conversation shifted. As soon as the divorce is finalized and her name is off everything, we can move on the acquisition, Jackson said, his tone becoming more serious, more businesslike. Is it still safe? Amber asked, a flicker of genuine concern in her voice. The numbers, the ones you cooked for the Series C funding round. If anyone looks too closely before the Omnicorp deal goes through, Jackson waved a dismissive hand. Nobody is looking. The auditors signed off. They see what I want them to see. That's what a $20,000 a month consulting fee buys you plausible deniability. He stood up and walked over to his desk, picking up a framed photo. It was his and Olivia's wedding picture. He stared at it for a moment. The real genius of this, he said, a cold smile playing on his lips, is that the divorce is the perfect cover. If any financial irregularities ever do come to light down the road, my first defense will be it was a messy divorce. My unstable wife was trying to ruin me. She must have messed with the books. It's airtight. Julian Thompson physically recoiled. He was being named as a pawn in a scheme to commit securities fraud. His career was flashing before his eyes. He slowly began pushing his chair back from the table, trying to create physical distance from Jackson as if the man were radioactive. Amber, on screen, laughed a sharp, ugly sound. You really are a bastard. Jackson Reed. I'm a survivor, Sean, he corrected her, placing the photo face down on his desk with a soft thud. And the only thing that matters is winning. We needed to liquidate my position in Wells Innovations without spooking the market or Omnicorp's due diligence team. Hiding the assets in offshore accounts under the guise of protecting them from a spendthrift wife is the only way. It's brilliant. And Olivia, Amber asked. Jackson shrugged, walking back to the couch. What about her? She gets a pittance enough to keep her from being a nuisance. She'll be a single mom with a history of mental instability. Who's going to believe any story she tries to tell? She'll be nobody. And we, he said, taking Amber's chin in his hand, will be in Monaco. He leaned in to kiss her again, and as he did, Olivia paused the video. The image of their triumphant, treacherous kiss was frozen on the giant screen. Silence. A profound, absolute silence descended upon the courtroom. It was heavier than any sound, filled with the weight of shattered lies and exposed corruption. It was the silence of a detonation's immediate aftermath. Before the screams and the sirens begin, Jackson Reed was a statue of pure terror. The blood had drained from his face, leaving a sickly, waxy pallor. His mouth was slightly agape, his eyes fixed on the woozen image of his own perfidy. He looked like a man who had just witnessed his own ghost. Amber Dixon was openly sobbing now, not quiet tears but ragged, heaving gasps of someone whose entire world has just been pulled out from under them. Julian Thompson, the silver-haired predator, looked like a broken old man. He slowly removed his glasses, polished them with a trembling hand, and placed them on the table. He would not be putting them back on. He was done. He looked over at Sarah Bennett with an expression of utter defeat. Sarah, for her part, remained professional, but a single tear traced a path down her cheek, a tear of relief, of vindication, of awe at her client's courage. But all eyes eventually turned to Judge Carter. She sat motionless for a full 30 seconds, her gaze flicking from the screen to Jackson, to Amber, to the lawyers, and back to the screen. Her expression was unreadable, carved from granite. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, but it carried an authority that seemed to shake the very foundations of the room. Mrs. Reed, she said, her eyes still locked on the frozen video. Thank you. You may stop sharing your screen now. Olivia complied. Her face, calm and composed, reappeared on the television. She had done it. She had survived the fire and brought back proof of the arsonists. There was no triumph in her eyes, only a profound, weary sadness. Judge Carter turned her gaze upon Jackson Reed. It was not a look of anger. It was a look of pure, unadulterated contempt. Mr. Reed, she said, her voice dripping with ice, your charade is over. She then turned to the bailiff. Bailiff, please escort Ms. Dixon out of my courtroom. Her presence here is no longer appropriate. In fact, it is an offense to this court's dignity. Amber didn't need to be escorted. She scrambled out of her chair, tripping over her own feet as she fled the room in a state of utter disgrace, her sobs echoing in the hallway. The judge wasn't finished. Mr. Thompson, she said, her voice hardening, you have approximately 10 seconds to explain to me why I shouldn't file a report with the state bar for suborning perjury and attempting to perpetrate a fraud upon this court. Thompson stood, his face ashen. Your Honor, I was not aware I was misled by my client. The judge cut him off. Joe, that is a conversation you will have with them. For now, consider your involvement in this case terminated. You are dismissed. Thompson gathered his briefcase with clumsy, fumbling hands and all but ran from the courtroom, not daring to look back. Now it was just Jackson, alone at the plaintiff's table, a king suddenly stripped of his kingdom, his courtiers, his clothes. He looked small, pathetic, and utterly broken. Judge Carter looked at the court stenographer. Let the record show, she began, her voice ringing with judicial fury, that this court has just been presented with compelling prima facie evidence of a conspiracy to commit perjury, willful concealment of assets, and what appears to be a confession to securities fraud and money laundering. She picked up her phone. Bailiff, Get me the chief clerk on the line and have someone from the district attorney's office and the U.S. attorney's office meet me in my chambers immediately. She put the phone down and fixed her final damning glare on Jackson. Mr. Reed, your divorce petition is dismissed with extreme prejudice. All motions you have filed are denied. This hearing is concluded. She slammed the gavel down on the sound of final, definitive crack of doom. And I would strongly advise you not to leave the state of California. The slam of Judge Carter's gavel was not just a sound. It was a fracture in reality. For Jackson Reed, the world compressed into a roaring tunnel of silence. The polished wood of the plaintiff's table felt cold and alien under his clammy palms. His vision blurred, the faces in the small gallery twisting into grotesque masks of shock and fascination. He saw a smartphone raised, its dark lens a malevolent eye capturing his utter ruin. The name he had spent a lifetime building into a monument of success had been reduced to rubble in less than an hour. Two bailiffs, men with impassive faces and shoulders as wide as the courthouse doors, moved with practiced calm to stand behind his chair. They didn't touch him, but their proximity was a cage of invisible steel. He was no longer a tech mogul, a plaintiff, a man of influence. He was a flight risk, a cornered animal. The air, once thick with his own arrogance, was now thin and unbreathable, choked with the dust of his collapsed empire. He finally understood the expression, "The walls are closing in." They were the cold marble walls of a legal tomb he had dug for himself. In the chaotic days that followed, the consequences rained down not like a storm, but like a biblical flood. Judge Carter, having referred the criminal matters to the federal authorities, wielded her judicial power over the divorce with the precision of a surgeon. In an emergency hearing Jackson was forced to attend with a hastily appointed public defender, she dismantled his life piece by piece. First came the restraining order, its language cold and absolute, creating a legal chasm between him and Olivia, and more importantly, the home he still considered his. Then came the asset freeze. It was devastatingly thorough. A team of forensic accountants, now armed with the map Olivia had provided, worked with federal marshals to lock down everything that came in accounts. The shadowy LLCs, the secret portfolio meant to fund his new life with Amber. All of it was seized. The Omnicorp acquisition, the deal that was to be his crowning achievement, evaporated overnight. Its board citing a catastrophic failure of character and fiduciary duty in a press release that was mercilessly direct. The division of property was the final, brutal act of severance. Citing Jackson's profound and malicious conspiracy to commit fraud against his spouse in the court, the judge made a ruling that was both a restitution and a punishment. The sprawling minimalist mansion, the place he saw as a temple to his success, was awarded solely to Olivia. It was no longer his sanctuary, it was the spoils of a war he had lost, of what remained of their legitimate wealth. The judge carved it with a blade of pure justice. 75% was granted to Olivia, a sum meant to secure her future and that of her child. The final 25% was placed into an ironclad trust for the baby, naming Olivia as guardian, but managed by a third-party bank, ensuring Jackson could never touch it. When the accounting was done, Jackson Reed, the man who had graced the cover of business magazines, was left with a single checking account containing less than $5,000, a wardrobe of expensive suits that now felt like a costume, and a legal bill that stretched into the stratosphere. His life devolved into a series of beige, soulless rooms, the grim offices of overworked criminal defense lawyers who spoke in flat, pessimistic tones. They didn't see a visionary, they saw a desperate client with a high-profile case and no money. He'd see his own haggard face on the news, the damning video of his confession playing on a loop. He was no longer a person, but a spectacle of disgrace. The cruelest cut came when his new lawyer informed him, with a distinct lack of sympathy, that Amber Dixon had been granted immunity in exchange for her full cooperation. The woman he had planned a future with was now the star witness for his prosecution. Her betrayal was as complete and calculated as his own had been. 6 months passed. Autumn bled into winter, and winter thawed into a tentative spring. Inside the house that was now a fortress of peace, Olivia Reed had systematically erased the last vestiges of her husband. She had repainted his office a soft, warm cream. His clothes were donated, his accolades and photographs packed into boxes and relegated to a distant storage unit. She found a surprising solace in physical labor, spending hours in the garden, pulling up weeds and planting new life hydrangeas, lavender, and a small vegetable patch. With each weed pulled, it felt like she was uprooting a painful memory. With each new bloom, she was cultivating her own future. The house was no longer silent, intense. It was filled with the gentle, gurgling sounds of her daughter, Emma. Born in the quiet moments of a January dawn, Emma was her anchor to the new world she had built. She was a tiny, perfect creature of pure innocence, untainted by the sordid drama that had preceded her arrival. Rocking her to sleep in the dead of night, Olivia would look down at her daughter's face and feel a love so fierce and protective it eclipsed all the pain that had come before. This was what she had been fighting for. One bright April afternoon, Sarah Bennett came to visit. The two women had forged a bond that transcended attorney and client. They sat in the sun-drenched kitchen, sipping tea, the air filled with the scent of freshly baked bread. Sarah slid a plain manila envelope across the polished kitchen island. "It's official," she said, her voice gentle. Olivia looked at the envelope, but didn't reach for it. She met her friend's gaze. "He took the deal." Sarah nodded. "He took the plea. His lawyers knew he stood no chance at trial. Your evidence was a nuke. Olivia, he's pleading guilty to one count of wire fraud and one of securities fraud. The U.S. attorney is recommending a sentence of 12 years in a federal correctional facility. With good behavior, he'll be out in 8 years." The number hung in the air. Olivia thought of Emma, who would be in elementary school by then. She felt a strange, hollow ache. It wasn't triumph. The time for that had passed. It was the heavy, somber finality of closure. A door was not just being closed, but being bricked over, sealed forever. "And Amber," Olivia asked, her voice barely a whisper, "testified against him at the grand jury hearing," Sarah said, a note of distaste in her tone. "In exchange, she pleaded to a lesser conspiracy charge. She got 5 years probation and a fine that will wipe out whatever savings she had. Her name is poison in every circle she ever tried to enter. In a way, her sentence is a life of her own making." Olivia nodded, taking a slow sip of her tea. She looked through the window at the garden, at the green shoots pushing their way through the dark soil. She had been through the fire, dragged through the darkest parts of another person's soul. But she had not been consumed. She had been forged. "Thank you, Sarah," Olivia said, her voice filled with a profound, quiet gratitude. "For everything. For believing me when I could barely believe myself." Sarah reached across the table and placed her hand over Olivia's. "Olivia, I just held the flashlight. You were the one who navigated the maze and slayed the monster. You're the strongest person I've ever had the honor to represent." Later that evening, after Sarah had gone, Olivia stood by the large window in the living room, holding Emma close. Her daughter was asleep, her small body warm and heavy against her mother's chest. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and violet. She thought of the man who was Emma's biological father, a man who would exist for her daughter only as a cautionary tale, a faded photograph in a sealed box. She felt a pang of pity, not for the man who was heading to prison, but for the man she had once loved, the man who had lost his way so completely that he tried to destroy everything good in his life. She had survived him. More than that, she had prevailed. She had lost a husband, a partnership, and a life she realized had been built on lies. But in the ashes, she had found her own unshakable strength. She had found her voice. And she had her daughter. She held Emma a little tighter, her lips brushing the soft fuzz of her hair. "It's just you and me, little one," she whispered into the quiet of the room. "And we are going to build a beautiful world just for us." The last rays of sunlight streamed through the clean glass. illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny golden promises of 1,000 peaceful tomorrows. The storm had passed. The wreckage had been cleared. This was the dawn. The story of Olivia Reed is a harrowing reminder that sometimes the deepest betrayals come from the people we trust the most. It's a story of greed and arrogance, but ultimately, it's a powerful testament to resilience, intelligence, and the unbreakable strength of a mother fighting for her child. Olivia was dismissed, underestimated, and targeted, but she refused to be a victim. She used her pain as fuel and her knowledge as a weapon, proving that the truth, when meticulously armed, is the most powerful force for justice there is. Her victory wasn't just in a courtroom, it was in reclaiming her life, her peace, and her future. In the quiet moments with her daughter, in the garden she tenderly cultivated, in the new sense of self she discovered these were the true triumphs, more lasting and profound than any legal judgment. For every woman who has been made to doubt herself, who has been violent or manipulated, who has been told she is too emotional or unstable, Olivia's story stands as a beacon. It reminds us that our intuition is often right, that our strength can surprise even ourselves, and that even in our darkest moments, we possess the power to rewrite our own endings. The mansion that Jackson had built as a monument to his ego now stood as a testament to something far more enduring: a mother's love, a woman's determination, and the quiet, unstoppable power of truth. As Olivia stood in the fading light, her daughter's heart beat steady against her own. She knew that the story Jackson had tried to write for her, the story of a broken, discarded woman, had been torn up and replaced with something infinitely more beautiful. The story of a woman who refused to be erased, who fought back with dignity and intelligence, and who emerged not just whole but stronger than before. In the end, it wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was about reclamation. Olivia Reed had reclaimed her narrative, her worth, and her future. And in doing so, she had ensured that her daughter would grow up knowing not the pain of betrayal, but the power of resilience. The final light of day gilded the room in gold, a fitting coronation for the queen who had conquered her darkest hour and now stood, unbroken and unbowed, ready to embrace the dawn of a new day.